And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It is NBA Observations, everyone. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Joe Soro is floating around somewhere. And I think we're going to get him on the show tonight to talk more about the Vogel situation. Frank Vogel was fired today by the Phoenix Suns, so definitely want to hear what he has to say. So we'll probably do another show this evening. You know, he's Oxide 247 at LakersBall.com. Plus, also as well, of course, he is the man behind Simblades with a Y.com. Plus, also as well, of course, our good friends at the Laker Holics crew of Laker Tom and Jamie Sweet. They're talking about what the Lakers can do. Always at LakerHolics.com. Our good friend John Costa. He is managing Clutch Talk and Lakers Corner. Our good friends Lakers in 5, Empire Jeff TV. Of course, Daniel Barry Sports Highlights. Also as well, of course, John McCallion channel. Please support all these great channels. And most importantly, support our great channel here at the Lakers Fast Break. We are trying to go ahead and get into the big time when it comes to Lakers shows. Jovan Buha, if you can support Jovan Buha and you can get him to 10,000 subscribers just like that, why can't you help us out and get us there too? We've got a more entertaining show than his show. All respect to the work that he does, but still, I think our show is pretty darn entertaining. And if you think so too, get people to go ahead and subscribe and like and follow and do all that fun stuff that helps us out right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Well, it is another great episode coming to you right now on NBA Observations, because this man right here said he wanted to talk some hoops. And when this man says he wants to talk hoops, I listen. And so should you. And he's a good man behind, of course, the Twitter handle at @report_court that you need to follow today to get the latest goings on in regards to draft prospects. And of course, the NBA draft lottery is coming up this weekend. If I'm able to schedule it, I would love for you to join us on playback.tv/LakersFastBreak for the lottery. I know we're not involved, but it's always just fun going ahead and talking for an hour with my friends and just shooting the breeze and making fun of all these other organizations. It's always fun. It is, of course, my good friend, Mr. Stone Hansen. Also, don't forget the show he works on. He's returned to in Upside Swings. Stone, great to have you here, my friend, talking basketball today with me. How's it going, my friend?
Pretty good. I've not been able to catch a whole lot of playoff basketball as of late, but good. Just doing some draft stuff.
If you get a chance, though, just see some footage on Minnesota. I put it out there that if Minnesota plays like the way they have played in the last 4 games, I'm not even talking about their first 2 games at home against Phoenix. I'm talking about the last 2 against Phoenix on the road and the last 2 on the road in Denver. Those last 4 games. If you watch any of that footage on the defensive end, to me, they look like a team that's going to be hard to stop. And I'm putting them right now as my favorites to win the world title if they play like that. That's if they play like that.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion because I haven't watched them in that stretch.
Okay.
So,
all right, but size, length, speed, youth, athleticism, all the things that you would love to build a team around. So we're here today, my friend, because you are the exact polar opposite of Joe Soro. And, the reason why I say that is because I love the fact I respect Stone. I respect his answers. I respect his opinion. He always gives you that preface first. And then he says he totally disagrees with you on the direction the Lakers should go. But for some time now, you have stated not only in regards to Darvin Ham, which ultimately you were correct on, and the team terminated his services, but also in doing a rebuild entirely on the Los Angeles Lakers, which I know came to as a shock to some people out there that love the LeBron AD combo and still have hopes that the LeBron AD combo with the right team around them can still make waves in the NBA. You are seeing it in another fashion as far as I just put it out there as far as their aging. LeBron is closing in on the big 4-0. AD, how many more full, complete years like this are you going to get? Maximize his potential as far as in a trade at now would be the high point of which you could probably get something for him. So these things I understand are probably not being discussed in El Segundo. But my question to you, my friend, is should they?
Yeah. I feel like, uh, yeah, I've been teetering on this for the past 2 years. I've brought it up here and there, and I've been teetering, and I think this year or last year I was pretty in on it, and this year I'm 100% in on blowing it up. I think firing Darvin Ham was a good first step. It's to me it doesn't matter who we hire because it's just band-aids. We're not gonna win a championship based upon who we hire as the next head coach, in my opinion, as currently constructed. So to me, it doesn't change that outcome. I do think of any of the candidates that have been listed or floated around, it's all of them are an upgrade as to what we had, but um, I think that it's not the answer, the full answer. And really, idealistically, the full answer is blowing everything up, including the ownership, the front office, all of that. That's just never going to happen. So we can only focus on what will or what could happen down the line. My thing is, I want to start that process now, but I understand it's more than likely going to happen later rather than sooner. Um, and to me, that's unfortunate because I think you're prolonging a process that is going to have the same outcome whether you want it to or not. Is eventually this LeBron AD combo is going to run its course. People don't think it's now, and that's fine, but at some point you will have to come to grips that when LeBron retires or AD he gets to the age of 34, 35, because he's not going to play at LeBron level when he's 40. He might good chance he's out of the league before he's 40. Very good chance. So at some point you will have to get to that rebuilding point. It's just a matter of when, not if. And to me, I'd rather start that now because I think we've we've plateaued with this combo.
Once again, it is the Lakers Fast Break. It is NBA Observations along with Stone Hansen from @report_court and Upside Swings. It's Gerald Glassford. Coming right back at you here. Thanks so much again for joining us. We're talking about if a rebuild, complete rebuild, may be the best way to go for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I know that we're very, as a fan base, Stone, very sentimental, for lack of a better term, very, I guess, endearing and holding on to the fact that when you achieve so much success, basically, a lot of people just like doing anything they can to cling on to that success. And obviously, with the 2020 championship, the two key components of that championship are still there. I don't think that you could say that both are in their prime because LeBron is closing in on 40. He is about ready to most likely sign a multi-year extension or whatever he wants, because I think he has the sway of whatever he wants to do with the Lakers organization. So going forward, how would you pattern this out? Because it's looking more and more like, again, it is a business and LeBron brings in and generates money. So you have to look at it from that aspect. But Joe also admitted to everyone out there as well, and something the obvious, whether or not the Lakers have a marquee star or stars or not, it's still the purple and gold out there. And they still, even with a lineup throwing Robert Sacre out there, they still generated a huge amount of income. And that might be something people need to consider when deciding whether or not to rebuild the team, is that you will still get people filling in those seats at the crypt.
Yeah, and that's I don't think should be it probably is more of a concern to them than it should be. Obviously, it's easy for me to say when I'm not the one profiting off of that, but when you're a multi-billionaire, it's probably reasonable to assume that you can take a little bit of a hit if it means what's best for the future. Um, I personally do not care about the bus's individual finances. To me, it's if you own a team, it's your responsibility to put that money towards creating and doing what is best for the team. So to me, that is what's most important with those resources that they might have. Um, I think that what really brings in money is championships, ultimately, and I don't think that there's a viable route to that with how we're currently constructed. And if you want to get to that point, I feel like I just have a different path to getting there than what other people seem to at the moment. Um, or maybe it's not even a different path; it's just an expedited path towards me wanting to start that process sooner than most people do. And if you believe that AD and LeBron can still win a championship, that's fine. That's completely fine. But you also have to realize that with that, and there needs to be changes throughout the roster, and obviously the coaching now is going to change. But um, the roster we had last year is even with a better coach is not going to get us to where you want to be. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that there has to be more talent brought in, and that's going to be an uphill battle with this team and with the salaries that they have also.
But one of the things I want to ask you is the news today, because the NBA news still keeps flowing along, and it's not even relating to the NBA playoffs per se right now currently, is that Phoenix just terminated the contract after 1 year of Frank Vogel, who, I mean, looking at this from the outside, this occasion, I couldn't from the other side because we were on the inside as far as Lakers are concerned. But seeing this from the outside, it looks like he got the shaft again. Uh, I think he should be
Oh,
given more opportunity. But be that as the case, first off, any rumors that Frank Vogel is returning is ridiculous, because the fact after he got the shaft from the Lakers, there's no way. Okay, you would have to give some extra zeros for Frank Vogel to want to come back, and there's no way he wants to come back. So be that as it may, you can comment on the Frank Vogel situation, Stone. But I wanted to add in there, JJ Redick is the hot name because of his association and alignment with LeBron James on his podcast. And he's been very vocal and out there with his analyst capabilities on ESPN. His name has moved to the forefront because Mike Budenholzer's name has moved to the forefront of the Phoenix Suns job. Your thoughts on this head coaching situation right now for the Lakers?
yeah. The list, I would say about 80% of the time, the name that ends up being the coach for uh, the next coach for a team that had fired their coach is going to be listed in that initial Shams or Woj, whoever it was, tweet. Generally, like 80% of the time, you're going to see um, one of those names end up as the coach. I don't think it's going to be Tyronn Lue. I think it's a waste of time to talk about him because he's just going to stay with the Clippers, and I don't see it as that changing, even
Yeah,
if the
he's been
Clippers.
offered an extension, so it looks
Yeah,
like he is staying. Jason Kidd will be staying because he was also magically offered an extension just after the news of Darvin Ham being fired. Both of those guys did. So imagine that. It's
yeah,
again, this is getting a less and less. Uh,
it's narrowing
yeah,
down for
that
sure.
crowd is narrowing. So I
So
mean, yeah.
yeah, and the big balance that a team has to consider when they fire their coach is you have to really balance this fine line of okay, do how long do we wait to see which other coaches are fired and become available and go through our hiring process. But when you're one of the advantages of being one of the first teams that are the silver lining of being um, out of the playoffs in the first round is that you have less of a field of teams that you're competing with to bring in a coach. So let's say, for example, you wait until the end of the championship. You now have uh, probably a good 5 more teams that have fired their coaches that are in the hunt for other coaches and maybe more attractive coaching positions for the list of names the Lakers are interested in. So now you're widening the field of who you're competing for to bring in a coach that you like. So you do have to balance this process of waiting to see what other coaches become available, but also how long you're willing to wait and before those other coaches could be scooped up. For me with JJ, I'm very indifferent on him. I'm not really clamoring one way or the other to hire or not hire him. I do think he's very intelligent and knows the game well. To me, experience means nothing. We saw with him how much experience he had on a coaching staff in the NBA for years and years before he became the Lakers head coach. Like what that ended up as. To me, if you're either very good at the job and you're good enough to handle it, or you're not. And I don't really care what prior experience you have to that. The other aspect is um, coaching is not a. I think a lot of people tend to think of coaching as their first coaching position. That's what they paint them as. So if someone fails as a coach in the first time, Mike Brown did, he later on became the coach of the year for the Sacramento Kings because coaches do improve and they do decline. People think of Greg Popovich as a great coach, and he was during that dynasty of the Spurs run, but he's been pretty bad for the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. Um, so coaches they don't stay the same level. And I think that that's something to consider as well. With JJ, I don't really care that he'd be a first time head coach. I care that he can either maximize what this team is or not. And I don't know what the answer is until we hire him and put him on a court with those guys and give him a little bit of time to develop that. So I don't have a strong opinion one way or another with him. Kenny Atkinson, I think, was the other final name listed in that list.
JSJ wants to throw Dave Yorger in there, and then you got it's just a bunch of retreads. It's
Yeah.
JJ, assistant coaches, and a bunch of retreads. Although you can't even do Charles Lee anymore, who was the hot candidate from Boston, the lead assistant there, because he just signed a deal with Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately my view of coaching is you never really know what you're going to get until that product is out there, and it's really tough to decipher this is a good hire, this is a bad hire, unless you have a pretty extensive background. Like let's say with Doc Rivers, that would have been a terrible signing because we know that Doc has failed for many years now as a head coach. So there's things that you can point to that might sway you one way or another, but ultimately for most coaches you don't know what the product is going to be until it gets put into action.
Once again, I do have on the great Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and check out what he's doing today at report_court on Twitter. Follow him today to get a better idea of what's going on with the NBA draft. And again, if we are able to, I'd love to go ahead and have you join us on playback.tv/Lakers Fast Break for the draft lottery. I believe it's on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. A rare weekend draft lottery. I think they're just trying to experiment things. Well, and we'll go a little bit into the draft a little bit later on because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this draft because there's a lot of opinions and none of them are great. That's the problem, I think, with this one. But when it comes down to it, Stone, you've been advocating for quite some time in regards to a rebuild. Blow it up, rebuild this team from the ground up. We've seen varying levels of success of this blow up. I mean, obviously the Philadelphia rebuild that has not worked out. I mean, it kind of did in the fact that they got Joel Embiid, but they had so many shots at the apple. A lot of it was just mistakes after mistakes after mistakes, so they weren't able to go ahead and fully build the team the way they wanted to until other individuals came into place. So they do have a team now that I think with the right pieces, which they will be able to go ahead and add many this summer, they have a chance to go ahead and make themselves stronger come next season. But there is the Oklahoma City example. I think a lot of people are pointing to. While it hasn't yielded a championship, as Joe will tell you and point that out, it has yielded right now a possible future window stone that seems to be very enticing. I mean, they could literally be a I guess, a top level team with the right moves for the next 10 years with all the different pieces and the assets that they have going forward. So, again, I can see and understand why you would want to think a rebuild might be the best way to go for the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, and honestly, I think OKC has a chance to be the top team this year. Really, with the Nuggets now down 0-2, I think OKC I don't think they should be overlooked in a series against Minnesota, and if they were to beat them, anything can happen in the finals. So, I don't think it's impossible that they win the championship this year. And they're an extremely young team. Not every team that rebuilds, very few teams that rebuild are going to be what OKC is and what they have done. And I think uh, teams teams saw what OKC did and are going to adjust now and maybe not be as willing to give that much draft capital all to one team. And things may adjust from there. With Philadelphia, they had a string of unlucky injuries that came about. They didn't even let the guy who started the whole process, no pun intended, to finish it. You had many different visions and voices that were fired and hired throughout that whole time that Embiid has been there. So you didn't get he never saw it start to finish. Um, I know people say that the Lakers, I mean, and the Lakers can buy championships. They can pay these players and bring in max players. They can't do it like they used to because the salary cap makes it more difficult to do that. They're operating right now as a first apron team that would be butting up against a second apron team depending on what moves they make this summer. Um, and once you make those second apron moves, uh, there's many different things, penalizations that come with that, penalties, excuse me. And one of those is you can't really get better because you're not allowed to combine salaries and trades. You can only trade one player for one player, and that's a massive restriction that you have to make your team better. So you're in a situation now with the Lakers where you can keep trying to do this, and to me, we've now seen it the same result for 4 years. To me, it's defining insanity. You're retreading the same thing over and over. Yes, you have different players. Every year, it's LeBron and AD plus whoever is how it goes, and these players keep moving all around them. I know people say you want to build continuity with this team. That works if you're a young team. If you're bringing in guys that are 6, 7 year vets, they're already established players. They are who they are, and they're not growing up together with teammates. They're all journeymen. So it's not quite the same thing. Um, when you look at a lot of the top teams, the way they do acquire talent now is via trade. That's how most teams are going to have to acquire talent nowadays because you can get bigger contracts from the team that drafted you and then get traded. So you're seeing way less and less superstars go out on the free agent market and be able to sign as free agents than you are via trade. So what does that mean for the Lakers? That means that when you draft players that they you can now use them as trade capital to acquire those stars. Where right now, the Lakers are bringing in medium type caliber talent and trying to combine it all to bring in superstar talent. Where if you have homegrown talent, when you're picking higher at the top, you have a higher percentage to bring in assets to acquire those superstar talents. And that's sort of where I'm coming from, where I think it's an easier pathway to acquiring what you need to either grow with it, as OKC has done, or move it for the pieces that you want that to bring you a championship. Because right now, LeBron and AD by themselves is not cutting it.
Once again, it is, of course, Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and support him today at report_court. So, if that being said, I don't know. Again, it's a tough decision. I have in recent days started to lean where you're at because I just don't think with LeBron and AD they are a championship duo anymore. It just it does not seem like they're going to be able to stay healthy long enough to get you where you need to go. This year, they just take up too much salary cap to be able to build around them as far as an efficient roster. It just seems like there's too many things that would prevent a LeBron AD from ever getting back to that level again. So I think that's something that I think we need to come to a realization on. And I'm just not sure that most people are coming to that. I think most people, they just see a lot of things with their heart and they're not with their head, because the fact that, again, I think Alan, who's always in our chats, said it best, that right now, probably the best way to build a championship team is with younger assets, with assets that have not reached those massive extensions, and to be able to build it in that window, within that window that you have, that 2, 3, 4 year window before they start all piling up on extensions on you. Like, for instance, Boston. Boston looks great right now, but as soon as Tatum signs his extension, if they don't win a championship before then, it really gets expensive for them. That it will be really hard pressed to go ahead and continue their success, because of the fact that they'll have so much money tied up. And so I think that your reasoning in building a younger team makes sense, because of the fact that the salary structure and salary cap way that the aprons are aligned and set up makes it so that you're supposed to try and have a window where you're able to go ahead and maximize your team's potential, but it has to be from an earlier standpoint, as opposed to a more experienced standpoint that you had even, let's say, 5, 10 years ago. Like, for instance, Golden State, they were looking for more experienced players. Now you're looking for those younger players that at 22, 23, 24 can really fill up the box score and maybe help you win a lot sooner.
Yeah, and there's a couple ways to branch off of that. One being that when you are bringing in those guys, you now have, and you've saved your picks and collected them. You now have a instant funnel of those players, so you can continue to bring those guys in instead of having to rely upon bringing in mid-level exception guys every year, or these journeyman vets that are good for 10-15 minutes a game. You can fill that role by using it to develop a younger player that can then hopefully, idealistically, expand from those 10 to 15 minutes to be a more integral part of your rotation. So I think that's one way to look at it. The other thing um, is that, like you said, you're limited now to the amount of high level contributors you can bring that are veterans, because of how the salaries and all that work. Again, the main currency for how the NBA operates is picks. That is how everything is viewed through a picks currency, is how it is viewed. Um, and if you try to rebuild, you're looking at, okay, how many picks can I get from this guy? Um, and if you're trying to do swaps, a lot of times it becomes lateral, because you're trading like for like value in hopes that it fits better. So for me, I just think going and collecting as much of that currency as you can, as OKC has done, tends to pan out fairly well. Yes, they haven't won a championship. They've won just as many as the Lakers have in the past 4 years. The Lakers are they're doing the same thing, and the two main reasons I think people don't want to do a rebuild. One is, I know a lot of people say they don't believe in Palinka to do a rebuild. I can't say I have much more faith in him than they do, but I can also say that uh, I don't have faith in Palinka to build a championship caliber
Yeah, I don't think
roster around
anyone should
LeBron and
have
AD.
faith in the Lakers doing a real rebuild. Let's just make that clear.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is, what makes you have faith that they can build a championship roster around what they have right now? They haven't been able to in the past 4 years, and I don't know why I would start believing now. The other thing is that I know a lot of people just don't want to suck. I get it. You're going to suck. You're going to suck in a rebuild for the next few years, and that's just how it goes. On the flip side of that, what how much uh, joy do you get out of watching a team continually just bail out as a play-in team? Like, is that really bringing you a whole lot more happiness than it is being in the final few seeds in a conference? To me, there's no difference. If it's not a championship, it might as well just be a wasted season. So I'd rather at least be working towards something than continuing to stay put over and over again. And that's sort of how I view it.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Go ahead and check out what he's doing today at report_court on Twitter. One of the ways you can do a rebuild, or at least to look to build your team even better or try to be more competitive, is through the draft. And that's something that you have paid quite close attention to and are paying a little bit more attention to this time around as well. This draft has not been spoken of well, and I'm trying to put this in the nicest way possible, Stone, because it could be a situation where 10 years down the line we could all be proven wrong in about how bad or inept this draft is compared to others, because I do think there's candidates there that can and help and will help their teams. Your thoughts on this draft or overall, your initial, I know you've only looked at what the top 10 or 15 candidates so far as the draft prospects are concerned. You've only looked at extensively at those individuals so far. I understand that there are no marquee star players that are just popping out at everyone in the case, but I do believe there are opportunities, and quite often with the right team drafts the right player, anything could be possible.
Yeah, I am at about 30 guys now, so I don't have a full
Okay.
grasp of everybody yet. Ideally, at the minimum, I generally like to scout about 75 guys. I don't know if I'll get to that this year, but I'll try and get to as many as I can. This is my, let's see, 2024. This is my 9th year doing draft work, and this is easily and by far the worst draft that I've ever evaluated. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a bad class. That's not to say that there's only bad players in this draft. I hope people don't hear it that way, because there are good players, and I think that there's a couple guys that could be potentially perennial all-stars. Maybe two guys in this class, maybe, and the rest, I think there's a handful of guys that could be starters and very good rotation players, and then it very quickly dwindles out. Again, I've only seen about 30, so that may change, but at this point in time, it's not a very good class. That said, I'm much higher on a few guys that could potentially fall to where the Lakers might pick should New Orleans decide to defer to next year, which I would expect them to do.
Okay, because they have until the 1st to decide that. So,
and I think
just to remind everyone,
it's a good. There's two ways that New Orleans is going to approach this. It's either one, they're going to wait until June 1st to make that decision to make it as difficult as possible for the Lakers to be able to get their draft process in order, and see what they want to do for this offseason. And the other aspect of that is maybe they do a favor to the Lakers and do it much quicker, in the hopes that there's always the I scratch your back, you scratch mine type of relationships in the NBA, and this might be one of those moments. But honestly, I think that there's a 60 to 70% chance this pick ends up being traded by the Lakers as part of a bigger package to bring in more immediate help, because that seems to be the route the Lakers prefer.
But now, do they have to make the choice on this one before they're allowed to trade it because of the Stepien rule? As far as or is this one they are free to do? Because they do have 3 first-round draft choices they can trade as far as future draft choices are concerned this summer.
This would be one of those 3,
okay,
I believe.
This would be one of those 3. Okay, I just wanted to make sure on that. So if that's the case, Stone, again, and I'm not sure that's going to be the best thing in the world to do, because like you said, this is not the greatest year, or this is not the greatest draft. You have to be a team that has to have like, oh, okay, you guys are not seeing what we see in this one player, so we are going to go ahead and make the effort to go and make the change on that. I just don't know what you're going to get out of a number 17 pick in a, what you said, a below average draft. I just don't know what people can expect about how valuable that can be. They've already missed possibly on 2 occasions with last year's draft in both the first and second round. There's a very good likelihood that both players will never achieve anything monumental in the NBA at all in Jalen Hood-Schifino and Maxwell Lewis, because those two look really lost, is I think probably the best way to say it out there in the NBA. But I think the team right now can no longer afford misses. The team has got to go ahead and start getting some quality players that can give you rotation minutes, and it needs to start sooner rather than later, Stone.
Yeah, and so the way to approach, I mean, just the cold hard facts of the draft, and there's been extensive research on this, not necessarily by me, but I've seen the numbers on it. You're usually getting about 12 to 15 NBA rotation players that stick beyond like 5 years in the NBA. That's out of 60 picks. That's generally what you're getting. About 12 to 15 of them hit and end up being NBA rotation players, and 15 is obviously for a better draft. In the second round, you're getting 2, maybe 3 second round guys that end up sticking, maybe 4 in a really strong draft that end up sticking as long term guys. So to me, the second round, it's there's players I like in the second round, but that doesn't mean I believe in them to be NBA players long term. Because the reality is, and statistically, it tells us that about 90% of those second round picks end up being nothing. So I don't tend to bank on those. The higher you pick, the higher percentage you have of nailing one of those picks to be an NBA player. I think that in this draft, it's going to be far less than the average, in my opinion. I think that there's 2 players I'm really interested in keeping this pick with. 2, probably 3 actually, but one of them would be Ron Holland. He's first on my board.
Will he be there?
Well, he's expected to go later, but I think there's scenario. This draft is more unpredictable than most, and most drafts are fairly unpredictable. So I think with this being even more unpredictable, there's not a high percentage, but a chance that he could be there.
And this was a player that at one time, this time last year, was the number 1 guy for this draft.
Yeah, he was, and that's where I have him. I still think he's the number 1 guy in this draft to me. The other player for me that has a better chance of being there would be Isaiah Collier out of USC. I really like him. I have him top 3 on my board.
He was also the number 1 pick in the draft as well.
Yeah, and the other guy who was never supposed to be a number 1 pick in the draft and won't be, but is Jalen Tyson, someone I really like, who does not have the star equity power of either Collier or Holland in higher end outcomes, but I think is someone that does a lot to impact winning. And if you can get a player like that in this class at 17, that's really good. And I think that is a guy I'd be happy with taking again at 17. Outside of those 3 guys, I'm pretty indifferent on it. The only other guy I'll mention too, I forgot. Sorry, one last guy was Day'Ron Holmes. He probably won't get picked this high. He seems like he's more slotted to go in the late first or early second. But if we're looking for a really solid center who can play backup, play alongside AD at times, but again, I don't love that spacing. To me, Day'Ron is that sort of guy. I have him at 6, which is much higher than most, but I really think he's really interesting as a center who can defend in a lot of different ways. So those are the 4 guys I'd be targeting with pick 17. If it's anybody outside of 17, I'm way more prone to moving this pick. And if we pick somebody outside of there, I'm pretty indifferent on it. It's could go one way or another depending on what the name is. But that's sort of where I'm at with the Lakers in this draft.
One thing I do want to ask you, because it comes up, and there are individuals right around there, that spot at number 17. I know that Dallas last year hit a nice one with Derek Lively II, who's really made a good contribution early on as a rookie, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. There are individuals that I know that a lot of people, like for instance, Joe's talked about getting a big guy. A lot of people are pointing out getting a big guy to pair along with AD, someone who could either you could start or have coming off the bench and playing considerable minutes. There are 7-footers, or let's say individuals that play the center position in and around the number 17 pick right now in most mock drafts. The Kyle Filipowskis, the Khalil Wares, the Eves Missies, those guys don't seemingly move the needle for you at all, because those are the names that are right around the 17th spot for the Lakers as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be Filipowski, Missy, Ware, and Edie. Two of those guys are going to actually, I'll be talking about in far great detail with upside swings probably coming
I did
out
want to
this
mention
weekend.
Edie because he would be a reach right now. He is listed right now in most mock drafts, right at the highest I've seen him is 24, 25. So I didn't know if you wanted to. That's a big reach.
I'll throw him in there because I think a lot of people do really like him because of how productive he was in college. But so those are the four names outside of Holmes that are centers that are likely to be there, because Klingon and Sar obviously will be long gone. So I'll just kind of go down the list briefly. I won't spend a ton of time on each one, but with Filipowski, I think he's a pretty skilled offensive player. I don't think he's a good enough shooter to be able to rely upon that, which makes me less inclined to like him on the Lakers alongside AD, because his defense is so atrocious, in my opinion. He's someone, in my opinion, that cannot play playoff basketball. I don't really see that as a viable option for him, or at least provide playoff basketball minutes that are going to lead to winning basketball. So I'm not interested really in him for the Lakers. Um, Eve Missy is almost sort of the opposite, where his touch and offense is so horrendous that as a center, he's a great dunker, and that's basically what he's boiled down to. Again, I'm doing this in briefer terms, but his touch is very bad, and he doesn't have a ton of finishing moves at the rim. And when you're a roller, you have to be good at multiple things as a finisher to succeed in that sort of rim running role. He's good defensively, but I don't think he's as versatile as people might think. And he's going to have to, if he's playing alongside AD, it's going to be really tough to fit him. And if you're playing as a primary backup, he might provide what we need, just as some rim resistance. Um, the other guys that we mentioned were Ware. I actually talked about him for like 40 minutes last night when we recorded. Ware's very interesting. He's one of the guys I've probably scouted the most in high school level, and I've watched him for maybe 4 years now. I liked him a lot more back then than I do now. I've grown lower on him as time has gone on. Um, I bought the shooting a lot more in high school than I do now. I think he can still be an okay volume shooter for a center, which means like maybe he hits 1 3 a game. So it's a little bit meaningful, but not meaningful enough to be a full on threat from there. Um, I think he can protect the rim, but he's so thin that a lot of times he's going to get bullied as a post up defender. I think he's more of a help side shot blocker. That would be probably his best role. He puts very little effort forth in rebounding. Motor has been a big thing with where that people tend to harp on. I think it gets miscategorized sometimes because he lacks a lot of awareness. I said it on Twitter at one point because I think it's something that is actually happens a lot in the NBA, and probably gets under discussed, where guys, there's some players such as where he is locked in on one player defensively, or locked in on the ball, so much so that he's not seeing other things develop around him. And so I sort of am using the phrase uniprocessing because he can only process one thing at a time instead of both things simultaneously at the same level. So I think he's become sort of this uniprocessor, which limits what he can do as a defender. And the final guy is Edie. I know a lot of people love Edie because of how productive he was at Purdue for multiple years. Um, there's no denying how productive he was. I think when it gets down to it, he is. Uh, I don't think he's at an NBA level offensively that people production at the college level does not immediately translate to production at the NBA level. We've seen it in the past with guys like Marcus Howard, for instance. He fell out of the league very quickly after getting drafted by the Nuggets. Um, it's just, it doesn't always mean you're going to instantly be an NBA player. I think Edie can succeed in the NBA as a backup at times, but I don't think he uh, has great hands offensively, despite how huge he is. I think he's fundamentally sound as a post player, but he's a very bad passer, in my opinion, and he also has trouble reading the floor in totality. So he doesn't see defenders when he's posting up as help defenses come and strip the ball around. I think he's going to be very turnover prone. Defensively, he's huge. He's massive. He can provide some rim resistance. He's going to be a nothing in transition, in my opinion, and he's not going to be versatile. He'll have to exclusively play drop defense. So those are just sort of my spark notes on those players and how I view
Just
them.
some notes, just some sparks. No, it's just not too much there. No, not at all. Are you kidding me? That's great, man. Of course, it is Stone Hansen at report_court on Twitter. One name I want to talk to you about, and this is about the G League. As far as the G League Ignite, they're played close to me. They unfortunately are no longer going to exist. I kind of personally am sad to see it go, but I can understand its logistics and finances with NIL no longer needing a G League Ignite. I kind of liked the fact that they were getting that kind of experience, that there were players that didn't want to play at the college atmosphere, that wanted to bypass that and play against guys that, while some of them were earmarked for the pros on other teams, most were not, but they were a little bit of a higher caliber of players. There's one name that is right around there in Tyler Smith at number 17 that might be available, 6'11". I don't know what you talk, tweener forward, because he's like 220, so he's not exactly the strongest guy in the world, but he does have a touch, and he has been playing at a level against players who have played or will be playing in the NBA. Your thoughts on Tyler Smith as far as maybe an experiment that people want to go to, or somebody that maybe want to go ahead and reach and develop from there? I don't know. I've seen some video on him. He does have some things that could possibly interest a team like the Lakers, but then again, when you're dealing at 17, you're as we see with Jalen Hood-Schifino, you are taking a big risk.
Yeah. So if it's not one of the four guys I mentioned previously with Holland, Collier, Holmes, and Tyson, then I'd be okay with drafting Tyler Smith. I wouldn't be ecstatic over it, but I wouldn't be as down as I was with JHS at 17 last year. I think that I actually talked about him extensively, I think on the last episode, and he was, to me, just he's very simplistic, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just that he does a couple things and he does them well. Uh, he can space the floor well as a bigger guy. He's going to be power forward. He can't play center because he's just not a good enough rim protector to do that. Not a good enough low man rotator to be able to be a primary rim protector. I think on the perimeter he's going to struggle defensively too because um, he's not mobile enough. He has sort of the build and the frame to where you think he might be, but when you watch the games, I don't think he's quite there. And I think he's a good roller. So he's very simplistic as, being this guy who can space the floor more, can maybe provide some glimpses of help side rim protection, and can roll pretty well. And this is about the range I have him on my board. Let me see real quick. I have him at 15 on my board. So this is about the range I have him. I would just really hate taking him over one of the other four I mentioned previously.
Okay. No, I just was wondering because, again, if any one of those names drops like a Cam Whitmore did in this previous draft, and obviously that might be something of great interest to the Lakers. But if not, and you're not able to trade that pick because, again, it is considered a very weak draft, and not a lot of teams are going to be. There's going to be more sellers than buyers, I think, in this case, Stone.
I think there's going to be a lot of teams trying to sell, but if everyone's trying to sell, that means there's not a lot of people buying.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. So Tyler could be someone that the Lakers could be interested in as far as if those other prospects are not there. And again, two of those prospects are interesting because that's how uh, this draft is when you have a Ron Holland and an Isaiah Collier who both within the last 365 days have been earmarked as the number one the leading contender to be picked number one, and now both have fallen for whatever reasons, whether it's health issues or productivity issues. They both have fallen from that spot, in some cases quite dramatically. But I want to ask you this: when it comes back to the top of the draft, I mean, the names have been changing all the time. Alexander Sarr, who had it for the past few months, has been replaced by I'm trying to get his name right, but it's Zachary Risacher.
Risacher.
Okay. I mean, I've seen some footage on him. Impressive to say the least. But what really makes him stand out as the possible number one choice? And I say that very loosely when I say possible at this point in
time. So personally, I don't see why he would be the number one pick in this class. I have him at 12 on my board currently. So that's not to, and I still like him. That's not to say I think he's bad. I actually think
funny. That's just hilarious to me. Sorry.
No worries. I mean,
that just tells you this draft in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I actually think he's at least right currently on my board. That's like where the fall off really starts is after Risacher. So he's sort of the last guy where I think he's more of a player I'd really be interested in at 17 at some point, or to some degree, I should say. But I think what people like about him is that people think he's a really good defender, and I'm not going to dispute that. But I think a lot of his defensive acumen comes in a team defensive type scheme, where I think people may have the perception that he's a great individual one-on-one defender, and he's good at that, but I would not say he's elite at that. And I think that's an important distinction to make, where I think a lot of his really impressive defensive value lies within an off-ball and team defensive type setting. And then offensively, people are sort of split from what I've seen, or at least the circles I'm in, on the shooting. He started off very hot and then had a very steep decline over the past month or two. I personally buy the shooting as a spot up guy quite a bit. I don't really buy on ball shooting equity where he's taking things off the dribble and doing that sort of thing. I think if he's coming off of screens and things like that, he can be a pretty interesting off ball shooter. I think he's a good finisher too. He's very long and he uses that length well around the rim. He's going to have to bulk up, and I think he has the frame to do it, to be able to take more hits along the way. But I could see why people have him top 5 to 10, somewhere in there, where I think most people do. Some have him at 1. I don't really get that personally. But I still like him. I think he's going to be a fairly good player. It's just I don't necessarily see the upside to have him quite that high.
So let's go ahead and bring it back in the final minutes of the show. And again, once again, I have Stone Hansen here at report_court on Twitter. Please follow him. He still takes such great time and detail in looking at the various prospects. He said he's now up to 30 different prospects out there. So please go ahead. If you want to check out his thoughts, there is no one better at the game than Stone Hansen, in my opinion, as well. Tell you what, though, before we head on out, when it comes to the Lakers, again, a lot of things had to be decided upon with Mike Budenholzer, now the leading candidate. I'm sure he's going to be signed here. Adrian Wojnarowski has already pretty much all but said that they're wrapping everything up as far as the numbers are concerned. So it looks like Budenholzer is going to be leaning in as that new Suns coach. The options are getting less and less available as far as coaching prospects that interests anyone out there. So with that being said, Stone, you've said you're indifferent on JJ. I mean, where does this organization go from here? Because again, blowing up might be the smarter option, but as you and I both know, this organization for so long, following it for so long, that's not the path they're most likely going to take.
No, I think my opinion is far from realistic. I think it's very much going to be a. I think the Lakers are going to approach this as they have the past 4 seasons, where all right, one more uh, swing, with the bat. Let's try and do what we can here. One more run at it. Um, I think that's what they're going to try and do. I think most likely that they most likely go for a third star. That's just the bus way is star collect. That seems to be what they've always done and what they will probably continue to do, in my opinion. They'll try. I don't know if they'll land one or not, but I think that's what they're going to try and go for. Um, and I think they probably lean towards a coach that is younger. Is my guess. Kenny Atkinson is within the coaching game, not as old as some. Um, but JJ, in my opinion, is probably the most likely. I think they want. I think they want in their vision, and we don't know if it'll be executed all the way through because we've seen how quickly coaches get fired, both in general and as a Lakers head coach.
Especially
But
if you're Frank Vogel.
yeah, I mean, but I think the vision they'll have headed into this coaching search is a we want a coach that can get us. They want the best of both. They want to eat their cake or have their cake and eat it too by hiring a coach that can get them to where they want to be, which is a championship, which they still view as a very possible thing. Um, but they also want a coach that is going to extend beyond that and usher in the post LeBron era, I think is really what they're going to try and go for. And I think they probably view JJ as that. I don't have any intel on this. This is just me sort of reading the tea leaves, but I think that that's sort of the direction they're going to try and go. Um, and it's a worthwhile direction. I think his um, him him being a podcaster is I think should not exclude him from being a serious candidate, but it also shouldn't be what makes him a serious candidate. I think that there's nuance to be had somewhere in between there, and that's sort of where I lie. And I think that he displayed his knowledge of how things are run. Uh, I think he can probably better understand and better communicate these things than Darvin Ham could. I just don't think Ham was much of a communicator. I just don't think that's really his personality. And I think that JJ can probably do that a bit better. So I view him as an instant upgrade. How much of an upgrade that is yet to be determined. And we won't know really until that's put into practice.
I'm just going to say this, Stoned. I've got 4 years left on my contract that paid me a total of $31 million. I could just sit for the next 4 years and not have to deal with the stress. I understand it's a competitive thing with these guys and all that, but if you were Frank Vogel, and I think he got the shaft on 2 occasions now, he built. I know Phoenix. They're on and on about how the offense was bad. His offense is never his thing, but Vogel, he got that team to play a top 15 NBA defense. And I think for the pieces that they had, I think that should be saying something. But again, it is a sweep. And of course, somebody had to go ahead and take the fall for it. And always the coach seems to be the case. In the case of Darvin Ham, we saw mistakes after mistakes after mistakes, both on and off the court, that probably warranted that decision to be made. But in the case of Vogel, I'm sure there were probably underlying reasons. People didn't like his rotations, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure that if you're a Phoenix follower, you have your situations. But, if you're Frank Vogel, I just don't think you should just go ahead and say, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and just take it easy for a while and see what happens next.
Yeah, it's up to him. I mean, I probably lean in the direction that he is maybe looking to be an assistant now after 2 head coach firings. Maybe he doesn't want the stress of it, and both those head coach opportunities came about with star-studded rosters, and it doesn't, to me, seem like that those opportunities are going to open up for him this summer. And if he's having to pick between lower end teams, it might not be as attractive as what he's been accustomed to the past few years. So maybe he goes and becomes an assistant for a better team, and that's the route he goes. Um, I think that's probably the most likely route. Or he just retires. I mean, um, he's done enough in his body of work, and he's made enough money to be able to go and live out the rest of his life if he wants to. So we'll see what he chooses to do. I think he's still a good coach, but I wouldn't expect him to come back to the Lakers by any means, and I don't think it's likely that he takes a head coach role anymore.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and support him today at report_court on Twitter. I will hopefully get Joe and Sean to come back tonight later on with their thoughts on the Vogel firing. And so hopefully we can get those guys on later on. But Stone, great to have you here. You asked, I wanted to make sure we would deliver for you a show today. I always love it having you on. But any last thoughts, my friend, before we head on out?
No last thoughts. If you're interested in the draft, you can give me a follow if you want to. If not, that's fine too. At report_court on Twitter/X. And then if you want to hear me ramble more about these players in depth, you can listen to Upside Swings. I'll probably have a new episode out this weekend on a lot of the bigs in this class.
Are you going to be on with them on Sunday?
I'll be working, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. No worries. No worries. Just the reason why is because the NBA lottery, which is still one of my favorite things that happens. I'm a sucker for the lottery. I'm just going to say
the drama.
Yes. I love the drama. That is one of the things I think the NBA has gotten right over the past few years. Yeah, of course, tweaking it, you can always tweak it. But the fact that you have a lottery, I still think it's just one of the coolest things out there. Frozen envelope aside, I just think it's one of the things that helps build intrigue, and it may not always be the fairest thing out there to build or to make sure that everything's done on a fair basis, but you know what, it is what it is, and I like it, and hopefully we'll get a chance to go ahead and on playback.tv/Lakers Fast Break and be able to share it with you guys out there if you're interested. But Stone, great to have you here. Looking forward to seeing more thoughts on the Lakers and all from you here, but also seeing more thoughts on the draft prospects that you give at report_court. Looking forward to it, my friend, as always. But yeah, let me know when you can come back on, maybe next week or something like that. Or
yeah, hopefully. Thursdays tend to be best for me, so hopefully next week.
All right, sounds good. Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and support him today at report_court on Twitter. I, again, looking forward to seeing if I can get Sean and Joe to be on tonight for a snack pack or maybe even a nightcap. I don't know. It's up to them. But looking forward to see if I can do that. But Stone, always great to have you here and always great to have you a part of what we do right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.